Okay, so again, these are absolutely my favorite days of all the things that we do in the program. But I am joined by one of our amazing moms, a client graduate mother, who is here to really share her story. And, we always offer people the opportunity after they graduate the program to say, hey, would you like to share your experience? And Julie said, yes, I would love to share what happened to us and the journey and what it looked like, because I think it's really on her heart to share um, what that has looked like for her and her family. So Julie, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here and to be at this point in our
Yes.
journey.
That's amazing. Okay, so today we're talking about your daughter Mimi, who is 14, right? Nearly 15.
Nearly 15.
Yep. And then, I think we'll talk about this too, but we're also going to talk about you because you also have dyslexia and you went through the program with her. And so I think, there are often questions like, hey, does this work for an adult? And what happens if you have it? And can you still work with your child if you do or you don't or whatever? So I'm excited that we'll be able to speak about that as it pertains to your experience. So thank you in advance for all of that. So before we get going, I think it's always really helpful to talk about the before. So would you mind just kind of taking us back in your journey with Mimi and telling us a little bit more about some of the biggest challenges that Mimi faced before she started the program?
Absolutely. So, in the beginning of learning to read, there was just something in my mother's intuition that kept saying, don't push the reading yet, because we were homeschooling
Yeah.
and we did lots of like sound practicing, but I was noticing she wasn't grasping it the way, like my oldest child, like he has zero dyslexia. He is more like his dad, where like if he could look at it and read it and sound it out, he can spell it, read it, like all the things. He has like zero dyslexia going on. I didn't have to teach him how to read. He just kind of did. Like his preschool teacher helped him sound things out and he was off. And I was seeing it was really different. And there was more struggle for like retention and progression. And so we just did a lot of exposure to lots of things, but I kept having this feeling, don't push this like formal phonetic study. And I didn't understand it because I didn't understand at the time that I was dyslexic. So then as we were going through and I wasn't catching the signs because I didn't understand the signs in myself, there was still just this struggle for all language arts development. And we just plugged away every day and every day. And then I was seeing patterns of she would guess at words. And I didn't understand the guessing at the words where I was like, it's in front of you. Like you sound it out, slow down. And then she just got in these patterns and habits of lots of guessing. And then the place where it's really severe for her is spelling.
Yeah.
And by nature, she's a storyteller and like can learn something and regurgitate it. But I also noticed when we were doing an online reading program where we would like, she'd have a book where it would read it out loud to her and she could follow it along and then she could read it herself. And then it had a comprehension quiz at the end of every book. And she was like hitting all the marks on certain parts of it, but comprehension, she couldn't answer basic questions about it, which didn't match my experience with her like conversationally.
Sure.
So her reading wasn't hitting the retention and the comprehension. And then as she continued and she started integrating into a local charter school, they weren't catching it either. She had just enough of the reading skills, but writing and spelling like full on kryptonite for her, like so tough. And then I was going, well, I don't really understand, like I said, not understanding symptoms and like things to be watching for. And then I was concerned, like, well, we've done so much language arts practice. Like, why isn't the spelling sticking?
Yeah.
Because that's not my part of dyslexia. Like, I'm not a great speller, but I moved past spelling phonetically,
Yeah.
and she wasn't. So, when I watched the webinar like I saw the ad on Facebook, and I think it was like a 45-minute little video,
Yep.
and you showed the handwriting samples of a child, like at the beginning and at the end, and I went, she's dyslexic and I'm
Yeah.
dyslexic. Like all of a sudden, like the things that were taught in that video, I went, okay, we're dyslexic. And then I understood and it made more sense. So she developed enough of a reading skill that was it was flying under the radar. For us, the spelling was like
The
really,
big one.
really a big one. But that's how we started.
Wow, that's awesome, Julie. I didn't realize that that's the thing that caused you to realize that might have been happening for your family. It was the webinar. Wow,
Yeah.
that's awesome. So, I mean, and I get that this happens at a different way, in different ways for every kid, but did this impact Mimi at all in terms of her confidence or her love of learning, or in what ways did having this struggle with reading and spelling kind of impact her?
It has been previous to the retraining, it was um, very challenging for her. She had started developing lots of self-judgment about her ability to read in groups or around people, or like by nature being a storyteller, and she was so frustrated trying to document her stories and couldn't make sentences. She really couldn't build sentences no matter how much we practiced. So she started leaning into speech to text on her little Chromebook for schoolwork.
Yep.
So then again, teachers weren't noticing it. And I just thought, why aren't we getting this? You know,
Yep.
but she has described parts of her journey in the retraining as like, not only can she read more comfortably, she goes, reading was okay, but now it's better. But she says, I can spell. And she said, I used to be afraid of the pencil and I'm not anymore.
Wow.
Right? So
Yeah.
she leaned on technology. So she developed like anxiety over using a pencil because
Yep.
there wasn't autocorrect or spell check or
Yep.
any of those things. And so all of a sudden she's feeling way more capable. She has come
Wow.
to me crying multiple times and she says, Mom, I want to be a writer. And I thought that I wouldn't be able to because it was so hard.
Yeah, I totally get that.
And now it's like her possibilities are opening up. She's also
Wow.
described that visually, her visual strengths are increasing
Wow.
in relation to drawing and art. She says that now she sees detail and
Cool.
she's able to create detail that she couldn't before. And she goes,
Wow.
I never thought this would be part of it, but she goes, I can draw better now.
Wow.
So this has like totally changed her self-confidence,
Yeah.
her like willingness to try certain tasks, especially in
Yeah.
like a school group setting. She came home from class one time and said, Mom, I read in class today and I didn't feel embarrassed.
Wow. Yeah, not only did you do it, but the emotionality that went with it.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So she's had serious um like self-doubt, self-questioning, self-judgment heal up and
Wow.
turn into confidence.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
That's
especially at
absolutely
her
awesome.
developmental age, that is
Yes.
it's such a beautiful thing because being 14 is hard.
Yeah,
No,
it is all by
what
itself.
you have going on.
Yep. All by itself. It's hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, and I think you're bringing me to what I think is the natural next question, because a lot of families who have children who are 14, 13, 14, 15 years old, they've tried a lot of things before and they've, been unsuccessful before a lot of times. Otherwise, they wouldn't still be at our doorstep. And so oftentimes it's really overwhelming for a kiddo to have to put their hat back in the ring and say, okay, I know I don't have the result that I want. I know I don't feel the way about literacy that I want. Like I'm gonna do this. So what did you have to do, Julie, or how did that look for you guys to get Mimi on board or to really help her to see that this would be valuable for her at this moment?
Well, it wasn't hard to convince her that she needed help. I just explained about the video and then I said, I'm pretty sure that we're dyslexic.
Yeah.
And she was like excited and like totally on board. It didn't take any convincing.
Wow.
Now, we're in a unique position where finding this program was also how we figured out dyslexia. So we're so lucky that the first thing we tried gave us what we needed,
That's
where we
awesome.
haven't gone through the frustration and the angst and the disappointment of multiple programs that didn't give us what we wanted. But in the webinar was how I knew that this program would be what we needed, because I've been studying neuroplasticity and like
Yeah.
all these different things to help myself. I had brain damage following a medical treatment years ago, and it really affected my dyslexia, like shot through the roof after the damage. And I've been learning more and more about like the retraining and needing to grow neural pathways. And as I listened to you in the webinar, I went, this is the program I want because this follows the philosophy I believe in.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't hard to bring her along because I'd been bringing her along with my brain recovery journey. So
Yeah.
then this was just one more resource, one more added element.
Yeah.
And she jumped on board. There were days it was hard to
Yeah.
do the
Yeah.
word, but we didn't have resistance for beginning the program.
That's
And
awesome.
like I said, we're lucky because this is our first one. We kind of got a hole in one on this.
Oh, oh, that's super helpful, Julie. Because I mean, a lot of people ask that, like, how do would a teenager even be willing to be engaged in something like this? Or is it going to be a really hard sell depending on, those things? And so I really appreciate your perspective on that. So, if you were to think about some of the things that are happening now, and I think you kind of alluded to some of that already, but what were some of the joys or the moments where you were just like, oh my goodness, hallelujah, we're here. Like, this is happening for her, and this is what I always wanted her to experience.
So module 6 was hard for
Yeah,
Mimi. It was really hard. It's been a fascinating thing because modules 1, 2, 3, and I think part of 4 were really hard for me.
yeah,
Like she was breezing through those. And we had to go really slow because that was hitting my weaknesses.
okay,
And then module 6 was easy for me and extremely challenging for Mimi.
okay,
So when we went from, it would take us 15 minutes to break down one word
okay,
and do all of the tasks and like the work that we were being trained to do to be able to hear and represent all of the sounds and then
yep,
put it with the pencil onto the
yep,
paper where we
yep,
haven't been working with the pencil yet.
yeah,
That was hard to
yeah,
watch her struggle. And she was frustrated, but she went from it took 15 minutes to do one word.
yep.
Then on the final day that we practiced those tasks, she did 10 words
Oh,
in
wow.
15 minutes.
Good for
So
her.
to me, that was a massive celebration.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
we were high-fiving, we're doing a little dance. Like, look, we did this. Like, we
Yeah,
did this. You did this.
yeah,
You've worked through every inch of retraining this so that
yeah,
when you look at this, you know what you need to do to understand the word
yeah,
and to begin spelling
yeah.
and to hear and represent all the sounds.
Wow.
So that was a big one, really big
Well, yeah,
one.
I mean, I think the thing that's also powerful is that you can see in the data yourselves. It's not like she believes that you're, falsifying information. She
Yeah.
can see that there is a difference between day one and the last day in terms of her capacity, in terms of her reflexivity, and having how much energy she had to put toward that task. I mean, I think the automaticity, the ability to work through it easily without a whole bunch of struggle. I mean, it really speaks to the repetition, the consistency that all comes along with plasticity. So I think that that's a
Yes.
super powerful example.
Well, and like the consistency really is the secret sauce.
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, that is how plasticity works. And so, I mean, it doesn't matter if you're thinking about, like, my kiddos take ice skating lessons. If we went 7 days a week to ice skating lessons, we would have a different skill than we do right now when we go 1 day a week. It's just a very different thing to have to, like, almost grease the wheels all over again and
Right.
say, like, okay, I'm trying to get myself back accustomed to what I'm supposed to do that I'm remembering from 7 days ago. No, I mean, if the body, if the brain has the ability to do that consistently, gosh, you just keep building on exactly what you remember from yesterday.
Yeah, and I could see that it was so much easier for her to get to those new neural pathways that she had created
Cool.
instead of the patterns and habits of staying in the old ways in conjunction with the old beliefs about herself.
Yeah.
So, like, as she retrained her actual brain and
Yep.
created new pathways,
Yep.
then she also created new beliefs about herself and needed to kind of like work through, let go, and release the old beliefs in order to make room for these new beliefs and to trust them, to trust that she can do it instead of default to I can't, or instead of default to um, being defensive about needing to use that skill. And I don't know if I'm right or wrong. I think you'd have way more data on this, but I think that there are specific challenges that come the older that you are through dyslexia, but because of the mindset part.
Absolutely.
And then that is really an essential element, especially as they're older. If they've already like had times where they've been embarrassed in the classroom and then believed negative things about themselves in the process. And so we needed to address that quite often. And maybe this is something that other parents with older kids deal with when they're like, but this is like little kid stuff.
Yeah. Yep.
So we did take some time to often speak about where I said, okay, Mimi, both you and I have places in our brains where it doesn't talk to each other. And
Yep.
even though you and I both learned how to read a long time ago, there's this part that didn't get that practice.
Yep.
We need to create these ways, but we have to give it everything that you got when you were learning to read long ago when you were little.
Yep.
This isn't about being little, this is about building blocks. So
Yeah.
we did have to do like pep talk about around that
I
when
love that.
she would, I didn't realize that we had been dealing with, we'd been bumping up this brick wall, like we weren't making progress. And if they said, well, what's going on? And she goes, well, it just feels babyish
Yeah.
on this task. And that's when I went, oh, okay, we've got to adjust a little bit and speak to that. So kind of, reverse engineering where I said, okay, you and I both, like I said, I'm like, this part needs its building blocks. This part
Mhm.
has it, this part has it, but this part needed more, and we're giving it more, but we can't miss out on the things that just because you typically learn it when you're little doesn't mean it's a little person thing. It's a
That's
reading thing.
beautiful. Beautifully said, Julie, because it's interesting. Like, they've even done studies and surveys of teachers, especially at the high school level where I used to be, where they would ask them, like, okay, we've got all these students that are not reading well. What should we do for them? And to actually support the building blocks or the foundations, or really make sure that the brain is organized in such a way that they can hear and respond to language, and that's an automatic process in the brain. like, yes, it's intuitive to think that that would be true, but for whatever reason, the mindset struggles of like, oh, but this is an older kid, therefore I shouldn't do that, kind of get in the way. And so I really appreciate how I'm hearing you say without saying it, like you were so coachable in trusting the process. So, I mean, had you not trusted the process of like, okay, this is exactly what we need to do, and she wouldn't have it in here unless we needed to do this particular thing. I think, you know, your ability to communicate that to your daughter in a loving way where she knew that like this is safe, she's supported, she's loved, she's all of this beautiful stuff at the same time as the learning happens. And that's the part where our partnership with you becomes so critical because it's really, I mean, nobody knows how to do that better, I'm sorry, than a parent.
Right. Well, we hold a unique position for the children
Mhm.
because they're relying on us to give them their best shot. And even if this means we have to completely learn this whole new branch of neural study and brain retraining, if we're willing as parents, we hold the power to change their world, because as an adult my world has changed, and I'm so excited that Mimi is going to move into her adulthood without these stumbling blocks. She will always need to make sure she's taking good care of her brain, but she has what she needs to move forward to do it, and she knows how to ask the right questions now
Yeah.
and to seek more intervention if she needed it down the road. Or when she's a mother, and if she happens to have dyslexic children, as you know, the hereditary element,
Yep.
I feel just so empowered to give our next generation after my children, my grandchildren someday, that that we can empower them to like stand on the building block that we have built out. So all of it, like I feel so like tenderly and um like just this tender empowerment as a parent, because I may have gone on not knowing, and then my daughter's struggling and not hitting some of the opportunities she's very capable of. She just needs a little intervention. And so without the intervention, what would her life path look like without it? And I don't have to worry about that anymore. And that's such a like amazing paycheck for me as a mom. Just go, it's we found what we needed, and then we found the courage and the the mindset that sure, we're not going to do this like everybody else, but we're going to do our part to make our lives what we want it and not be in a handicap that we could empower ourselves to overcome.
Wow, that's everything that you've said, Julie, is so incredibly powerful because you're right. I mean, as a parent, I think for all of us, we want our child to live up to their greatest potential. I don't care what you do. I don't care what your job is, you know, but I care that you're happy and I care that you're living up to your potential. And I think that that's, I mean, in what I'm hearing you say, that you feel like she's got a different avenue toward her potentiality. I mean, one of the things that I really loved you sharing during the Q&As was about her story writing and how that evolved. Would you mind just kind of sharing, because this just makes me smile, like what happened with Mimi's stories and her story writing?
Well, she talks about them a lot. She hasn't quite gotten brave enough to like document her stories, but she was asked to be like a little youth speaker in our church congregation.
Love it.
And she hand wrote her entire, like an entire lined page by herself. And she used a dictionary. For the words she couldn't remember how to spell, she just used a dictionary. And she came into my room that morning and she said, Mom, look what I did. So while she hasn't, because she's so busy with school, she's not giving a ton of time to documenting her stories. She tells stories. She's
Love it.
verbally always telling stories. But her, like that day that she wrote a full line page of paper, I had kept it. It's in our dyslexia stuff because that was not an option 6 months before that, a year before that, even 3 months before that. I don't think it would have been an option. We'd been in the program for a while at that point, and like that to me was completely life-changing, like totally life-changing. And now her stories, she just keeps her nose in a book. Like every time I turn around, she's got her nose in a chapter book, which isn't great for
Wow.
homework. Like she needs to get some more homework energy, but she got a book series that had 18 books in it for
Oh,
Christmas.
wow.
And she's just got her nose in these books, and she didn't even give chapter books much energy till she was 12. And then we found the program when she was 13. And so, like, even though I know down the road, she's like, Mom, in high school, I want to take some creative writing classes. I want to learn how to be a writer. I don't think
Amazing.
she would have considered that for her curriculum at school without this. I think she would have talked herself out of it. And so, like, we'll see. The opportunities are just like opening up. And like, to me, it's like if your child needed a prosthetic leg, but nobody understood how to build one, like, of course, we know prosthetics are a thing. This is like the brain's prosthetic. Like, we needed to grow our own inside our brains, and we would never just like give up on a kid that needed a prosthetic.
Right.
So parents dealing with like, how do we find the help that we need?
Yeah.
This is just so, like, it just creates the prosthetic the brain needs. I don't really know how else to say it. It completely retrains it and gives us the bridges we've been missing for connecting information and connecting like memory and retention. Like, oh my goodness, I had lost so much, for me personally, lost so much memory, like doing the working memory and the resources part.
Yeah.
That was like monumental for me personally. And I remember the first celebration I shared in the Q&A after doing a lot of the working memory retraining was that
Yeah.
I could remember the 6 digits for the password to get into the Zoom room. Before that, I could only hold 2 digits. And I'd be like, okay,
Wow.
this number, and I type it in and go back and type it in back and forth. And then now I can just do the 6. And I
Wow.
couldn't do that before we retrained this.
Wow. Okay, Julie. So this is like, I think, a very natural time to start talking about you and your journey because maybe people know this and maybe they don't, but dyslexia is highly heritable. So anywhere between 50 to 84% of people who have somewhere in their line, have another person in their family who also has it. And so it turns out that, so when did you figure out during this webinar also that's
That's
what
what
you were dealing with?
that's what convinced me.
Wow.
I had wondered, reading was always hard. I
Okay.
remembered as a 5-year-old reading those little books that the kindergarten would print out and we'd staple them. And I have this little book and I would just look at it and I would say, I hate this.
Yeah.
And I had siblings who were not like that, like
Yeah.
just like soaring through. And I just kept thinking, what's wrong with me?
Yeah.
I remember that as a little child, just being like, why do I hate this?
Yeah.
Why is this so hard? Every step just felt so arduous, just like sounding out the word Bob,
Yeah.
like was so hard. But I grew up in the 80s.
Yeah.
We didn't have the internet. We didn't have these kind of resources. There's all sorts of, we have access to so much more now. So then I managed to get through all of my schooling, including graduating college. I remember the final year I was in college, I was like, oh, I think I'm finally feeling like I'm a confident student. Like, too bad I'm at the end. But um, then as I was, fast forward 10 years and I had the damage after a treatment, that it got bad.
Okay.
Within a year, I couldn't read 2 or 3 sentences and have any
Wow.
comprehension. Like I lost serious function. And
Wow.
then and I thought, well, I wasn't like this before. So I
Yep.
can connect from a traumatic event to now, and
Right.
then stress, and then other health issues coming up, autoimmune, like all these things, nutritional deficiencies. These are all things I've been addressing through the years,
Yep.
changing our diet, adding lots of intervention and specialists into our life.
Yes.
especially for me. But when I watched that webinar, it was because I wanted help for me.
Wow.
I didn't even know my kids were dyslexic until the end of the webinar, but it said, do you wonder if your child's dyslexic? And I'm like, I wonder if I am.
Yeah.
And so that was how I was like,
Wow.
I am. Now, like a few years ago, well, probably about 10 years ago, after the treatment, I started really flipping words.
Okay.
Like I'd be trying to read this sentence and my eyes would look at this sentence.
Wow.
So I knew that stuff wasn't working right because
Yep.
that was a new problem. I
Yeah.
didn't have that before. So it
Yep.
just took like my weaknesses and put it on steroids.
Wow.
And so I've worked and worked and worked to bring in whatever I knew and found to create more brain health
Yeah.
within myself.
Yep.
But I needed this deeper retraining. And I'm not kidding. Those first couple of modules, I was like, why? Like it was physically painful at times.
Okay.
It's my
Okay.
brain. I could feel spots where I was like, oh, that hurts. This is the damaged spot.
Wow.
The kids didn't talk about, like Mimi didn't talk about pain in her
Okay.
head. We
Okay.
would feel agitation, frustration,
Mhm.
want to run away, like if it
Sure.
hit a stress response, so we're hitting fight or flight,
Sure.
resistance, like these kinds of things that Mimi could articulate. I experienced physical pain at
Wow.
certain times, but the thing that blew my mind is that after like 1 or 2 days of the practice, the pain stopped.
Wow.
So
And
that
the skill followed along with it.
what was that?
And the skill followed along with it. Like,
Yes, it
obviously,
came.
you were able to then do the thing, right?
Yes. Yeah. And then it became easy the next
Wow.
day. The agitation was extremely high at times. And then I would try to push through it. And Andrew
Yes.
Huberman talked about agitation. Like, are we going to let our agitation be a barrier or a gate?
Yep.
And I knew that there were times where I was hitting it as a
Yeah.
barrier. And
Yep.
I said my husband would administer the exercises so that I could retrain with them, with like at the table
I love that.
with all of us, right? And he would take us through the exercises. And one day I looked at him and I said, I do not think I have it in me to do this whole list. I'm like, I might be able to do 2 or 3 words, but it was a list of like 10 words, whatever it was we were doing that day.
Mhm.
And I was so highly agitated by
Yeah.
like word 2 or 3.
Wow.
And then it came back in my mind. Am I going to use this as a barrier? Am I going
Wow,
to
Julie.
allow the barrier to stay here? Or am
Yep.
I going to allow this agitation to be a gate to lead me into the next step?
Wow.
And that day, I learned a lot about myself because I went ahead and said, okay, I'll just do the 10 words. I didn't want to. It was so agitating. And I
Yeah.
just went ahead and got to it. And the
Wow.
next day, doing 10 words was not hard. Like
Wow.
it was so fast. Like like kind of embarrassing. You know what I mean? Like it was
I
such a
do.
simple thing. Not embarrassing that I got better, but that I resisted it so hard.
Well, I mean, I think you're speaking to something that I think we all do. I mean, our mindset is so powerful and it's not to be underestimated. So I think we're all capable of so many things, and we put barriers on ourselves for one reason or another in many areas of our life. And so it definitely is this yin and yang between, skill set development and also mindset development, and the two have to be hand in hand. And so I think you're speaking beautifully to how much that, in our opinion, is vital that they're paired together, which is why we have mindset coaches as part of the
Yes.
program. I mean, it's, in our opinion, just huge. So how beautiful of you to recognize that not only like were you persevering through the skill set piece, but the mindset of perseverance and growth mindset and all of those things. I mean, holy cow, that's beautiful.
The mindset really is such a big part of any type of retraining. And I'd had experience with receiving coaching
Cool.
for mindset and growth mindset. So I came into it with that. which was another thing why I totally aligned with your philosophies and principles, because you include mindset coaching in it, because our mindset affects our brain
Of course
so
it does.
directly and
Yes,
specifically, as you're saying. And so, like, everything that I knew from my other training combined with this training and all the mindset coaching that you guys have included, it really does create a safety net for the retraining inside. And it's worth every bit of effort to heal up and increase and improve from fixed mindset to growth mindset. Anyone involved, give it your all. Give it your all and see what you can do. And every time you hit that agitation, it's just an invitation to grow. This
that's
is
right.
it's an
Oh, Julie, I love it.
invitation. And we get to decide, do we hit our head on the brick wall? And sometimes I needed to hit that brick wall until it gave me the courage to push
Yeah, I
enough.
do really want this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I test that. Absolutely. No, it's I so appreciate not only your philosophy about how you were going to handle this challenge. And I think it is hard. It's hard to find out that your child is struggling. It's hard to feel like you're in the abyss of like, what am I going to do about this? And I'm flooded with information and what's the right thing. And at the same time, like doing nothing, I'm hearing you say was not an option. Like I'm gonna support her. I'm gonna support myself. I mean, we're gonna overcome this because I believe that that's possible. And so I think, your belief in opportunity, your belief in, the best quality life for yourself, for your daughter. I mean, all of it is such a vital aspect to not only who you are, but, I think your success in the program. And I don't even think we talked about her Mimi's data, but we should because it was
Yes, that's
amazing.
true.
So she made statistically significant progress in every area that we tested. And so, I think that it's helpful to know that we do measure before we start and after we get done to just see what impact the program itself had on it. But obviously the human element of like, well, what did this do to their comp stuff matters to us just as much, if not more, than the numbers. But she ended up at the 95th percentile for her phonological awareness. So, I mean, she only missed two items on that whole entire list of, like, can she hear all the sounds? Can she manipulate those, put them back together? She did amazing on that. So her reading went from the 13th to the 39th percentile. So one of the things that can happen is, as kids get older, there are kids that are neurotypical that started off like, your other children with the ability to read without anybody ever showing them, and they just keep growing, 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 growing. So it can be harder to catch those kids, especially in a shorter interval, because there's just a difference in like, I'm still struggling to hear all of these sounds versus like you've been doing this for 14 years successfully. But she made statistically significant progress, like two entire standard deviations of growth within that time frame. So it was just absolutely outstanding. And the spelling too. So, I think she went from the third percentile to the 24th, but she had an additional, oh my gosh, I think it was 13 items that she had spelled phonetically. She was missing like one or two letters beyond that. Maybe she put an EE and it should have been an EA, but her ability to hear all of those sounds and represent them even in very difficult multisyllabic words was there. So, just as you were saying, like the difference between I don't even want to pick up a pencil to I'm writing words like loquacious and I've got all of the sounds there. I mean, it's huge.
It is. It is. And like I'd forgotten part of one of those numbers. I was like, I'd forgotten that she moved that far.
Yes, she did.
It's such an like empowering and satisfying and fulfilling thing to
Yeah.
see that all of this effort has measurable reward for the work and the sacrifice. And yes, it's work,
Yeah.
but like when it's so rewarding, it's not arduous anymore. And we have what we need to hit to face any challenge coming up,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
it may
I
be.
love that. I love that. So, Julie, if you were to think about, because certainly, now that you know what to look for and you have been through this process yourself, I mean, I'm sure just even in conversations with others and, they're kind of talking about, oh, this is what's happening with my kid or whatever, I'm sure it rings bells for you. If you could give somebody hope or inspiration, or if there was like a message on your heart that like, okay, this is what I really want to say to somebody who might be going through this and their kiddo is maybe struggling or frustrated, or they felt the way that Mimi did, where it was like, I'm not good enough and I'm not capable of doing these things. Like, what would you want to tell them?
that it's possible
Yeah.
and doable and hard work, and it's going to pay off.
Wow.
And when we hit the barriers, it's not the end. It's not. It doesn't. I love how you say in all the coaching, we're meaning making machines. Like
Yes,
we
we
just
are.
make it mean something.
Yes.
It doesn't mean anything that we think it does. Like
Almost never.
we so easily put limits on ourselves, and our fears can allow us to put limits on our kids. And so if anything, to endeavor to be fearless in this process. And if you recognize some fear, take yourself aside, journal it out, work it through, go watch the mindset coaching, apply all mindset work to yourself. Because everything that we can do for ourselves expands the opportunity for our children. Maybe the parent doesn't need to retrain dyslexia, but maybe we need to retrain our mindset. And so,
Julie.
like, if we can model retraining, like I said, maybe the parent isn't dyslexic. I was, that worked for me. My husband
Yep.
is not dyslexic.
Yep.
He didn't need to, but we both needed to work on our mindset about it. And that when things got hard, it doesn't mean anything except for that we're working.
Yep.
It means that we're
Wow,
putting in the
Julie.
effort.
Ah,
It doesn't mean it's never going to work. It doesn't mean that they're failing. It doesn't mean that they're not going to go to graduate school. It doesn't mean that they're not going to be successful. It doesn't mean anything negative. It just means that they're working. It means that they're growing. It means that we're in that ugly, wonderful underbelly of progression. Like,
yep.
it's work.
Wow.
And so we never know, we would be bumping up against that barrier, and then boom, it would break down and leaps and bounds. You never know when you are 24 hours away from a massive breakthrough. So if anything, like, set the fear aside and open your mind to possibilities, because it's just around the corner. Maybe it's a long corner, but it's around the corner.
That's right. Wow, Julie. I mean, I could not say this better myself, so I'm not even going to try, but what a beautiful share. And I can feel how much it means to you to be able to not only talk about your journey, but to breathe hope and inspiration and light into people that might be afraid. And so I sincerely appreciate your willingness to do this, to give your time and your energy to inspiring somebody else who might be feeling a little bit hopeless at this moment. So Julie, it is truly an honor, and I mean this with like 100% of my heart. It has been an absolute honor to have you as a client, to serve your family, to be on this journey with you. It has been a delight to watch from this side to see what's happened not only for you but for your daughter. And so I truly thank you not only for being a part of our client family, but for your willingness to share your journey with others, because I have no doubt that someone is going to be massively inspired because of you.
Well, thank you. I too feel so honored. And I, like, all sincerity, I want to shout from the rooftops
Thank you.
for anyone that needs this kind of help. Like, I want to point them to you, because
Thank you, Julie.
I needed a tool set, and now I have it.
Wow.
And anyone who's looking for a tool set and then to get good at using it can find it here.
Thank you.
And it really is like mutual here. I'm just loving
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely, Julie. Well, thanks to everybody for tuning in to this celebration. I hope you found it as inspiring as I did. And we look forward to seeing you on another one of these that we'll do in a couple of weeks. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.